Well, I guess it's not morning, it's afternoon, so let me correct that. Today we are presenting the city's $70.1 billion preliminary budget for fiscal year 2014, the 12-month period that will begin this coming July 1st. We are currently in fiscal year 2013, and it goes through June 30th. We'll balance the 2014 budget, and we will keep our current budget balanced as well, and we will do that without raising taxes on New Yorkers. We will also protect basic services that safeguard our quality of life and support the growth in our city's economy. And I think it's fair to say our ability to do that is the result of the rigorous budget discipline that we're continuing to practice. In this year's budget and in the next one, city agencies are continuing the budget-minded actions we directed them to take last November. I'm very proud of them. They have continued to find ways to provide the services we all need, but not to spend more. They're also the 12th round of such budget measures we've instituted over the past 5 years that they have been following, and they will produce cumulative savings. These budget initiatives, which we call PEGs, programs to eliminate the gap, will produce cumulative savings of more than $6.3 billion in the current fiscal year and more than $6.5 billion in fiscal 2014, and I'll come back to that when we get into the slides. There is another benefit of keeping the city's fiscal house in order too, and that is that our sound management of city finances continues to give private employers good reasons to locate or expand their operations here and create jobs for New Yorkers. We've also fostered private sector growth with our strategy of diversifying the city's economy, focusing on the industries that are adding jobs now and will continue to do so in years to come. And those include our tech sector, film and TV production, tourism, commercial bioscience, and other industries. And one result is that there are now more private sector jobs in the 5 boroughs today than there were at the pre-recession peak in 2008. Since the end of the recession, as a matter of fact, private sector jobs have grown by 6.9% compared with a national growth rate of only 3.9%. Another result is that this fiscal year we expect to collect roughly $222 million more in non-property taxes than we'd anticipated in the November budget plan. That is going to help us keep our budget in balance, and we expect tax revenues to continue to be somewhat above our forecast levels during the rest of the fiscal year and into the next one as well. Predicting the future is difficult. You're never sure about the economy. We are subject to what happens nationally, but we've done an awful lot of things and we have some momentum. And so I'm reasonably optimistic that we will have a small increase in our tax revenues. It's not going to go off the charts and solve all problems, but there's no evidence that it is going to go down or even stay flat. Continued growth in our diversified economy is fueling our trend. That helps our bottom line, so does the persistence of historically low interest rates, which continue to reduce our borrowing costs and that allow us to save money by refinancing old debt at current low interest rates. Now, that's not to say that we don't face potential problems. We do, and we've identified them in this budget. For example, we're now anticipating receiving some $190 million less in next year's budget from the sale of new taxi medallions than were forecast earlier. When we present the updated executive budget in the spring, we'll have a clearer idea by then of just what taxi medallions we do have, but we have reduced the estimate of revenues in 2014 from $790 million to $600 million. Also, as I described in my testimony in Albany yesterday, we could lose state education aid, not just this year, but also next, because of last-minute roadblocks that the teachers' union threw up in our negotiations with them on a new teacher evaluation process. And because of that obstructionism, we expect our schools to take a $250 million hit in the current school year, and that loss will be directly felt in our classrooms, starting with the likelihood that we'll have hundreds fewer teachers than we expected as a result of job losses through attrition. We're hoping the legislature will ensure that this loss of state education aid doesn't become a perpetual $250 million penalty against our school children next year and every year thereafter, which is what the current state budget would make it. But again, we'll have a clearer picture of this when we come back with the executive budget in the spring. Before leaving the subject of state support for our public schools, let me point out that back in 2002, when our administration began, the city and state shared the non-federal costs of our public schools roughly equally. Since then, the state share has fallen to 39%. The city share has climbed to 61%. Also, in absolute terms, we have increased our investment in our children and continuing to do that with the budget presented today. Total city investment in the operations of public schools will be $13.9 billion in fiscal year 2014, and that is more than $8 billion more than the city committed to public schools when we took office. It's an increase in the last 11 years of 132%. So anybody that says that we don't take education seriously, I don't think there's a way as you could possibly demonstrate it more than those numbers. $8 billion more per year, not just once, per year, that the city is putting into education. And that's why we don't lose teachers anymore to Nassau County. That's why we do deliver the books on time. That's why our school system keeps getting better. That's why minority kids have increased at a faster rate than white and Asian kids in terms of getting the kind of skills that they need to share in the great American dream. The presentation that you're going to see in a minute also describes Hurricane Sandy's big, immediate, and long-term impact on the city's budget. You'll see that Sandy has cost us some $4.5 billion in emergency public services and damages to public infrastructure, including schools, hospitals, housing, and other facilities. We do expect that all of those costs will be covered by federal funding, and I want to thank Congress, the Senate, and this time for approving Sandy money. You can rest assured, be on the phone later today, as I was earlier, to thank the key senators that really got that over the goal line. All such federal assistance, including the Sandy relief money approved by the Senate yesterday, will be very welcome, and we're grateful for the congressional action which President Obama has promised to speedily sign into law. It is going to be a significant help with the great challenges going forward, including making New York a more storm-resilient city in the future. Let me go to the slides, but while I'm talking about Sandy, we're going to continue to work with Secretary Donovan and the state to help residents and businesses in the hardest hit areas to recover. You should know that Deputy Mayor Steele, Holloway, and then Mark Page and Seth Pinsky are engaged with the Secretary's team and the state, and we're confident that we can start to commit these dollars quickly and effectively to where they are needed the most. Let us go and try to give you a little bit of an overview. The budget is balanced. There's no question about that. The law requires us to do it, but we have a preliminary plan to do it, which we think is reasonable. Our local economy continues to recover from the recession, and that shows up in our tax revenues. We are reducing our forecast of revenues for the sale of taxi medallions. I told you that's just to be conservative. I hope I'm wrong. We are funding a small amount of additional expenses at city agencies. You'll see that in the tables. They really are de minimis changes, but we have to do that. We are getting some savings from lower interest rates, which we can refund our current debt. And these actions, basically, when you put them all together, including reducing reserves set aside for 2013 that turns out we don't need, although keep in mind, every year we put in reserves for the next year. If we don't need them, we take them out at the end of the year. But the budget is going to be balanced. And if you look at the whole thing, our city-funded as opposed to total funds, remember, there's a $70 billion budget, which is everything, and a $50-odd billion budget, which is just city funds. But our city funds' controllable expenses are falling by 1.1%, and I'll show you where that comes from later on. And our non-controllable expenses and debt service are growing by 6.8%. There's a little bit of an aberration of when funds came in, so I'll show you that as well. And the bottom line, if you put it all together, the total $70.1 billion is it's falling by 0.1% between 13 and 14. What's behind all of this? The U.S. economy is somewhat better. It was going down. Now it's not rushing on the way up, but it's still positive. S&P, the stock market, is doing a little bit better. That helps us because the firms here will engage in more M&A activity, which generates tax revenues, and people, when their portfolios go up, spend more money, and that results in sales tax revenues, and they're willing to make investments that they might not have been earlier. The volatility is way down. That doesn't generate a lot of volume in the stock market, but it does let business people have more confidence in making commitments for the future. Member firms on Wall Street, our 5-borough economic diversification plan has worked very well, but this is a major industry in our city, and these member firm profits are welcome. I don't know what goes on at the future fourth quarter. We are predicting a small amount, but that's keep in mind this is on a calendar year, and we'll see what happens there. Wall Street profit growth, as you can see, way down, way up, way down. It is very worrisome to us what's happening with New York City as a financial center. Some of the banks and foreigners in particular, you hear more and more rumblings that when the U.S. tries to apply its laws to overseas companies, they just don't want to have a branch here which exposes them to some of those things. So we're going to have to work very hard to make sure that particularly the foreign banks in New York City don't walk away from us. They clearly have been cutting back, all banks, domestic and foreign, because of Graham Dodd. They're just businesses they can't be in anymore. How that lets them make any money and make loans remains to be seen. And what happens with Graham Dodd, which is apparently really a disaster for the vast, vast majority of the banks, which are small banks that just don't have the resources to comply with all of the requirements. It's also worth noting, I think, that the effect of Graham Dodd is the big banks that were too big to fail are now bigger than they were when Graham Dodd was passed. It is not done what it was supposed to do, and whether Congress revisits it and makes it a more effective law in accomplishing the purposes that we're trying to do, I don't know. Employment continues to go up. Here was the peak before. We're getting greater than that. Here's us versus the federal government. Here is where it is. Construction and manufacturing, which are pretty, like construction is a $70,000 a year job, those have not recovered, whereas a lot of the professional services, which as you'll see we footnoted them here, legal, accounting, bookkeeping, computer science, management, consulting, advertising, et cetera, that's where the real job growth has been. This is the total tourism. Tourism employs something like 350,000 people in New York City. It's a broad definition of what tourism brings, but tourism is a very important part of our economy, whether it's stores, hotels, tourists come here and they need services, and then the companies that they buy things from need services. So it really goes through the entire economy. But this is a very envious trend, a record number of foreign tourists in that. And so far, what we can tell, there doesn't seem to be any diminution in the number of people that arrive at our airports and stay in our hotels. Vacancy rates, this is a number where you want it down. This is when we had booms here and here. And then remember, there was a lot more vacancies. But now it's starting to come down again, and asking rents are going up. So that's a pretty healthy trend for us. We do need some of these big buildings that are waiting to go up, to find tenants. And there are discussions going on. And I'm reasonably optimistic, whether it's down the World Trade Center on the far west side, Long Island City. There are lots of conversations going on with companies that want to expand. An awful lot of the companies that had back in the good old days back here talked about new corporate headquarters, never got those corporate headquarters, and their demands, assuming they're still growing, are still there. Home prices, better than in the U.S., sort of flattened out. It's hard to tell. There's just such a diversity of types of homes and price ranges, and the city is very diverse in terms of how people live. But there's nothing that would give us cause to worry here. We should be optimistic. The budget itself, this is in all funds, and this is in city funds. Let me go back to all funds. As you can see, we are spending a little more than we're bringing in. This was a period when we were bringing in a little more than we were spending, but it is fair to say the two are going pretty much in lockstep. And you can see year-to-year changes. We'll get in more detail there. But I think the important thing is here, we had a surplus. We've used the surplus. Here is $1.1 billion that we have as a surplus in 2013, the current year, which we roll into 2014 to help balance that budget, and that budget is zero. These numbers, you can take them a little grain of salt, because if things are a little bit better than we counted on, we will have a surplus here for next year. But at the moment, it does not look like that, and in any case, it certainly wouldn't be very big. Same thing is, it's the same surplus issue with the city funds, and I'll show you at the end where city funds are very different than total funds. The federal government and state government picks up a lot of health, human services costs and education costs, whereas if you look at the police department and the sanitation department, those are virtually all city funds organizations. These are the 12 programs to eliminate the gap that we've instituted. This is the current one that is being implemented. We're almost through with this, and we are saving these monies we said we would, and I'm very happy to say all the agencies have come through with the savings that they've thought. And the fact that here, half a dozen years later, we're still getting savings from things that we did back then says that we have been very responsible and kept these recurring savings going. It's not one-time. People always accuse you of doing one-time things. These are not one-time things. I'm sure there's a little bit of that built in there, but overall, when we've had these budget reduction programs, they've carried through. And the last one here. The scary thing is we've saved $6.5 billion here, which is virtually the same as the increase in our pension costs over the last 11 years, and less than our increased monies that we put into education. So all of the savings have gotten used up by those things times 2.5. So it is a constant challenge, and why I think it's fair to say next year, whoever succeeds us is going to have a similar kind of problem, to go and to keep finding ways to do more with less. And that's very healthy. That's what we should be doing. Our job is not to spend the most money. Our job is to provide the services the public wants with the least amount of tax revenues, because the public would like to have everything for nothing. And we can't do that, but we can come closer than we might otherwise. These are the individual programs, and you can see the percentages that we have asked for. Some of the monies are saved are with city funds, some with state and federal funds. Education, here's the real tale here. Back when we came into office, it was split 50-50 with the state. Today, the state's only giving us 39%. And we're picking up 61%. That just shows you that. Now, the states, I don't know what the state's total spending on education is. That would be interesting when you write your stories to find out. But if they are spending more, and we're spending $8 billion more per year over this, whatever they're doing, they're sending the monies elsewhere. They're not sending it here. And this is just keeps to be a bigger and bigger burden. We've not walked away from education in spite of the fact that I would argue the states walked away from us. We're spending $8 billion per year. Every single year from now on, it'll be even greater. But it's not by taking state money and doing it. It's by taking the money out of the pockets of the voters and the taxpayers in New York City. And you can see if they'd continue to share the cost, we would have had an awful lot less. In 2013, it would have been $2.1 billion less. So this is a very big problem. And I don't know how all this works out, and you're going to ask 1,000 questions, but the answer is we don't know how it's going to work out. But at the moment, the governor's 2013 budget, which we're currently in, he had $250 million extra for New York City. He had monies for other counties throughout. It required you to have sign an evaluation agreement with the unions. We have been unsuccessful to do that. I would argue that the 99% that the state is saying have signed, that is a fraud, it is a sham. The state law requires a 2-year period to evaluate a teacher, so how can you have a 1-year evaluation plan? It is just a joke. It's being able to say, I'll take the money even if I have to misrepresent what we have signed with the state, but we are not going to do that. If we have a deal, which I'd love to have, and which we've come very close on, it's going to be a real deal that will stand the laugh test. And I don't think you can say that about what was done elsewhere, but we certainly haven't been able to get to that level yet. And so during the rest of the academic year we're in now and fiscal year we're in, we will downsize. We will do it through attrition. We will do it through cutbacks. It will be not good for our kids, but I am convinced that the suffering that we will go through is more than worth it to maybe finally get an evaluation deal that will let us put only the best teachers in front of our kids. There is nothing that we can do that is more important. Going into the next year, the governor's budget has the current $250 that we're taking out of this year. They have, as of a few days ago, said, oh, we're going to baseline that, which means we'll lose it next year and the next year and the next year. So after 4 years, that's $1 billion out of education from the state. In addition, the governor has $224 billion in his 2014 budget, which is yet to be approved by the Assembly. We are at the moment assuming, Mark, am I correct? We're assuming we get that, because we don't know what the terms of it will be since the budget has not been approved. We know the $250 will not be there for this year unless something changes, because that was the date to qualify has come and gone. And it's just now out of the budget from then on. It's baseline. So there's not a question of whether or not you would get it. You would not get it next year unless somebody would go back and change things, which I suppose is always possible. You never know. But next year, we will have to, through attrition, reduce something like 1,800 teachers on a base of roughly 75,000. And for people that don't like it, all I can tell you is the taxpayers are putting in more and more money every single year. We've just got to get more help from Albany. We send an enormous amount of money up to Albany, and we're not by any means getting our fair share. And if the others say, well, they came to agreements, they really didn't. They just signed a piece of paper, which is, I think, as a taxpayer and a citizen of New York State, I think is an outrage. Hurricane Sandy. This $4.5 billion, and this is where it splits up, these are things that the city and the city agencies, city infrastructure, where that's damaged. $1.5 billion of this is in the expense budget, $3 billion is in the capital budget. Really doesn't matter why. Both will be paid for, all of this $4.5 by the federal monies that were approved by Senate yesterday. So this is just really for information, but it doesn't increase our deficit at all. The federal government will pay for that. And then, as I said, we'll work with Secretary Donovan to try to get the rest of the monies, whatever that turns out to be, to help residents and business from the hardest hit areas recover. Capital budget. You can take a look at this. It's not dramatically different. It's a 10-year budget. Doesn't change that much from year to year. What does change is these two bars. In the next year, it's always looks like it's going to be higher because we make commitments, but the real world is once you get into it, these things tend to stretch out much longer periods of time. So the first few years are always going to be dramatically higher. The bottom line is it's sort of it will turn out to be reasonably flat. The orange categories are that $3 billion that I talked about for Hurricane Sandy money, but it's not really coming out of the capital budget because we get the money coming in the other side. I guess it flows through, but it's not an extra expense. And these are the kinds of things we're doing. Construction of new schools. Yesterday up in Albany, one of the Assembly people complained about overcrowding. Two of them actually did, I think. We have very few trailers left around schools. There still are some, but we have created 100,000 new classroom seats over the last 10 years. That's more than most cities combined. It's an enormous number. The good news is more and more people want to send their kids to public schools. And if we ever catch up, if we ever have a problem like these cities that have empty class seats, that is not where you want to be. We have to focus. We are, just like we're doing with affordable housing, where we're continuing our 165,000 units of new or rehabbed affordable housing right through the recession, right through all the mortgage crisis. We kept going. We're on schedule. We're going to finish that early in the next calendar year. But the same thing is true with education. We have kept building all through this and not walked away at all. We have to go resurface a lot of lane miles. We've not done as much as we should have. There's lots of potholes and that sort of thing. This Round Out West Branch Tunnel, this is an aquifer that's bringing water down, that's leaking dramatically. We're building a new tunnel next to it upstate, and it's a city obligation. Sanitation vehicle replacement, we've gone for a long time with old vehicles. Some of them really are starting to cost us more in maintenance than you can possibly pay. So we're going and working on that. Sewer overflow, some of this is some of the green stuff that we're doing to keep storms like Sandy from having as big an effect. Somebody wouldn't stop Sandy, but they would stop a lot of flooding for a medium-sized storm. And you can go and take a look at a number of these other things. In the tables, let me try to point out some things here that may be aberrations. If you look property tax, it still goes up each year. Why? Because when we have an increase in value, it takes a while, 5 years, for the taxes to catch up with that. There are restrictions on how fast taxes can go up per year and every 5 years. And so even though a lot of property values have gone down, the total tax roll keeps going up. The tax is a little bit bigger, and there are some where the prices have gone up so much it just still hasn't caught up with them yet. Economically sensitive taxes, these are income taxes and things like that. And you can look, there's pretty much a 4% increase every year. So our total revenue is running 3.5%, something like that. And these haven't changed very much. Here are the controllable agency expenses. You can look through these at your leisure, and you can see how much it goes from year to year. And I'll show you when we get to the end. It's a little more interesting when you look at how much is city and how much is state. Non-controllable expenses. These are the ones that are really, as I said before, our controllable expenses are down a little bit, 1% or something. Our non-controllable expenses are up something like 6.5%. And a big chunk of it is fringe benefits, which keep going up. Keep in mind, these numbers are masked. We had put away these reserves, health benefit trust, and we're using it all up. So that understates this, and that's why it jumps from 14 to 15.8 in 2015, a very big percentage increase. But it's really just not having the middle dollars. Nevertheless, if you take a look, 6.2 for pensions, 6.5, 7, 7.7, 8.4. It just keeps going up and going up. And fringe benefits are exactly the I've just talked about, and pension benefits. You can see 7.7, 7.9. They don't go up as much, but it's the fringe benefits. That's the cost of health care. Everybody's got this problem. We keep talking about it as a big national problem. You can see it hurts us because we have to pay to keep people getting health care. Medicaid is still, the country's wrestling with how much money we will get. We use Medicaid monies to train doctors. We use Medicaid monies to take care of people who don't have any alternatives. If the government were to cut back, we share this expense with the state. It would be mitigated by that, but it would hurt our budget, and hopefully we'd have to struggle, and we certainly struggle to make sure we maintain services for those that need it. So you can take a look at the growth. It's a little more variable than the other kinds of expenses. Here is the difference between the two. The noticeable thing here is that there is no real change. It is exactly, this is November plan to January plan. In 3 months, nothing's really changed. And this is in city funds. The last one was in total funds. Once again, nothing's really changed. We did good forecasting. We've stuck to our budgets. There's always a small amount of variation up and down. You can see some expenses going down, some expenses going up. Here is the fiscal plan for 2013. And I would bring your eye to the city funds versus the all funds. This is the fiscal year this is the 2014 plan. And you can see, if you take a look, for example, police, it's pretty much the same thing. We don't get any state or federal monies to speak of, so our total funds is city funds, and that's true virtually of all of the uniform agencies. Whereas if you take a look at health and welfare, we get a lot of federal and state money, and so instead of $16 billion, we're only having to pay 10 of ourselves. And education, $25 billion, we're spending 14 of which is us, and that's the difference. Remember, that's the 60 we spend and 40 that the state spends. So overall, our budget is $70-odd billion, but really $50 billion in tax dollars that we have to come up with. And then here's the change between 13 and 14, and you can see the numbers aren't that much, but it's a lot of data, and you can go through and see where they are. Here is the November to now fiscal plan. Not anything dramatic, all small numbers. Here is the what we have to file required. Let me go back and take a look at a couple of these numbers to point out to you some differences that stand out. One is, hang on, I want to find revenues. The economically sensitive taxes here up dramatically compared to the others. Why? And this dramatically lower. That's really just shifting revenues from 2014 to 2013 because and you got to bear with me, in calendar 2012, which we just finished, a lot of people who wanted to, for example, sell their houses and take advantage of or businesses and take advantage of lower capital gains rates did that at the end of fiscal 2012. Which is the calendar year for the federal government, at least in terms of taxes. They then, when they do that, owe us money. That comes in right now, but we're in our fiscal 2013. But it's monies that we probably would have gotten next year. People would just hurried up. And so they really just moved the monies from here to here. It's not that the total tax revenues change dramatically. The 2 years average would be the same. Non-tax revenues, take a look at this. This is particularly high. Compared to some of the others. This had the SAIC settlement and the ING settlement in it, and it gave us some more tax revenues there. And so this comparison is really just because this was inflated, not because there was anything else. Mark, any other big one? There's one other that I mentioned. SAIC and ING. Yeah, that's in here. So this is increased because of prepayment. This is increased because of those two one-time things. With that, I'd be happy